Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Peridiam, and let's talk about the social pariahs in Survivor. Because Survivor is a social game after all, and in my opinion, the most important aspect of that game falls upon one word: socialization. Since the very first few minutes in episode 1 of season 1 of Survivor Borneo, way back in the year 2000, we have heard the elevator pitch of the game again and again.
16 strangers forced to band together, carve out a new existence, totally accountable for their actions. They must learn to adapt or they're voted off.
Minutes later, we heard one of the most famous confessionals ever given on the show from Richard Hatch himself when he touched upon this very subject.
I'm good to go, survival-wise. People-wise, it'll be a little more challenging. But I've got the $1 million check written already. I mean, I'm the winner. And it's that kind of cocky attitude that makes people really hate your guts. So that's the kind of thing I've really got to keep under wraps.
We also got to hear from Rudy Bosch right after, talking about the exact same thing.
The hardest part is hanging around with all these young kids. I don't even know what MTV means, you know?
One of my favorite movies ever is Adaptation, and that's exactly what Survivor is all about. Not fat Nicolas Cage, I mean the title. Adapting. Fitting in. Not even banding together so much as ensuring you're not on the outs, you're comfortably somewhere in the middle. Because surviving on Survivor is heavily dependent upon your peers, and when you're all alone on an island of one, well, you better hope you're on a well-lit studio stage with $1 million check in your hand. Survivor is oftentimes compared to high school, how the moment you step on the island, you are reduced to basic character traits with judgments cast based on very little merit, where being popular was suddenly the most important trait again, and the goal of life was no longer about whatever you prioritized before you set foot on the island. Now it was absolutely, indisputably about a hierarchy of self-advancement and profiting off the failure of others. Wait, are we still talking about Survivor? There's an inherent incentive to leave others behind, where, say, in a tribe of 5 players, if one player is at the bottom and targeted to be voted off, the other 4 are all one spot closer to winning the game. One player's failure is another player's advancement, a bit zero-sum, and because voting is how you advance, it then becomes a game of controlling the votes. And in order to control the votes, you have to socialize. While everyone likes to talk about the players who best socialized, had the best social games, were able to pull as many strings as possible to get as many people to do what was in their best interest, I'm more interested right now in talking about those on the other end of the spectrum, at the bottom of the proverbial food chain, because there have been a lot of these players, and they are just as important and relevant and prevalent as those at the top.
Who goes, if not you? There's reactions to actions. You chose a wrong action, and I mean, I love you to death, I care about you. I don't like to have to vote you off.
You think that what had just happened to you guys was a huge deal? You have no flippin' clue how many people are gonna do that to you guys.
Survivor rewards good social behavior, adaptation, but what about those who show up late to the party, who commit one too many social faux pas? Hold on, Peridiam, now that we've come this far, I gotta ask, what even is a social pariah? Well, I'm glad you asked. Without even attempting to be tongue-in-cheek, social pariahs are outcasts. Like the Outcast tribe or even the Edge of Extinction castaways, they have been outcasted from the main group, left to wither away while everyone hangs out at the cool kids table.
Nicole, Skinny Ryan, Lil, Burton, Michelle, and Trish. Do you guys have a tribe name?
We're the Outcast.
While pariahs can exist on many levels and pretty much exist in every season of Survivor, it is the extreme cases that I am most interested in for this video. While there have been many social pariahs over the course of Survivor on a small scale and on a bigger scale, more noticeable scale, I think the first major social pariah in Survivor, major being the key word, was in season 6, The Amazon, with Machete Matt, the crazy man himself, whom everyone basically kept at arm's length lest they have it chopped off. Matt was a really peculiar character who had no leverage in the tribe on a social level and was quite literally at the bottom of a communication line amongst the other players in the game.
Every morning I give Matt a debriefing of the
wild goose chases I want him to work on for the day, just to keep his mind busy so he doesn't really have any chance to figure out what's actually going on.
This is very highly confidential.
This to me feels way more extreme than any other case of a social pariah before Matt in the first 5 seasons. And I believe his status as a pariah, one who was consistently at the bottom and used by smarter players to advance their own games, was never highlighted more than when he was crushed in a 6-1 final vote over Jenna Maraska. I would argue one of the most shocking winners in Survivor's history. It goes to show how powerful being connected to your peers really is. Most players couldn't relate to Matt, couldn't get anything from him. They felt like he was more of an alien from another planet, and when push came to shove, they didn't ultimately vote for him. And if we want to talk about being on the nose, like I said earlier in the video, the Outcast tribe from Survivor Pearl Islands is more a manifestation of the idea of social pariahs. I don't actually think many of them in that tribe were actually pariahs to the degree that I'm looking for, but yeah, that tribe is basically on the money as far as this video subject goes for putting pariahs on paper as a twist.
Lil, Burton, grab your torches. Get fire. As always, fire represents life in this game. You now have fire again. You are back in this game.
We also saw Xian Wang in Survivor All-Stars have a brief stint as a pariah, mostly because she was the last woman standing from her alliance, and the rest of the players didn't want to work with her moving forward. She came to loathe all of them, spite them, and they didn't even really care because of how comfortable they all felt with their current social status. We saw Janu Tornell in Season 10 of Survivor Palau take the first ever trip to Exile Island, another manifestation of the social construct Survivor is built on. Being exiled from the rest of the players should be a bad thing on paper, but in the case of Janu, she was on the bottom and kind of ready to quit the game, so being left alone all by herself for a day was more of a strange blessing. Janu may be a case of what happens when one player is tired of playing, has no allies, and just doesn't see the light at the end of the tunnel. Less a pariah than some others, but still important to note given the historic first inclusion of Exile Island. If you asked me what one of my favorite pariahs in all Survivor was, I would tell you it was Jonathan Penner from Survivor Cook Islands, who tried his best to get along with everyone, but as it turned out, was just not among the right company for his personality. Again, we are reduced to high school, and Penner's ways didn't gel with his younger 20-something tribe mates. Not only that, but he also literally mutinied from one tribe to another, only to then flip back a few votes later, thereby ticking everyone off in the game. Although I get why he flipped, I do think he had lost so much respect at that point from so much of the cast that he was kind of drawing dead either way. And then, similar to Matt from the Amazon, there are a handful of social pariahs who are very much outcast due to their personality. However, because Survivor is a game, they are still brought into the fold to be used by a stronger player down the line. For example, we saw Jean Robert, a bit of a lumbering oaf from Survivor China, be kept on a short leash by Todd to serve a purpose as a number until the time came to let him go.
I did not know there was an American Community Idol.
American Community Idol. Cool. That's great. There was an American Immunity Idol.
We can really have some fun with this with you guys.
The same could be said of Matt, in that Rob Sesternino intended to take him to the final 2 where he would beat him, realizing Matt posed little threat to his own game and would be an easy beat in the end. We also saw this form of gameplay utilizing the social pariah to their advantage in the case of Philip by Boston Rob in Redemption Island, or Shamar being cared for by Sherry in Caramoan. Almost akin to a shepherd or a goat herder.
To be honest with you, I'm having some second thoughts as to who I want to sit there with at the end. If I were to keep Philip around, he's terrible in challenges, and he's a goat, perfect person to take to the end.
I'm not letting go of my boy Shamar. He needs to be right here in my back pocket. I want Shamar to keep annoying people because Shamar is my Philip. So I want to keep my Phil around.
The endgame of Survivor asks that you be more popular than the people sitting next to you, and hey, if Survivor is a big popularity contest held in high school, if you take the biggest pariahs of them all, how could you lose? Well, sand in the eye for 1, or them not looking out for your back at the final immunity challenge for 2. On the flip side of these cases, there are some pariahs who also fit the bill, but are so not in line with the rest of the culture of their tribe, they don't even become juicy targets to take to the end, but instead are more irritants that even seemingly intelligent players still desire to remove them from the board. We saw Sierra in Survivor Tocantins, who was disliked by most of the cast. Despite being so on the outs and a number for just about anyone who would be willing to work with her, instead of anyone trying to utilize her and take her to the end, everyone wanted to just get rid of her for quality of life and vote her out. Well, technically JT and Steven used her as a distraction to first take out Tyson, then took her out right after. I'm guessing she was too much of a liability to work with in relation to how the rest of the cast felt.
But that's out of your character. You say stuff, you know what I mean? You jump into any conversation about anything.
What I thought was the most powerful thing in this game. He was holding the idol, so therefore I was playing.
You do not
The most
speak
powerful
your
thing
lie.
is friends.
The same can be said for Abby Maria from Survivor Philippines, who actually did say it may have been a cultural barrier for her, hence why she was such an outcast. People just misunderstood her. Although I will say I think common decency and kindness is kind of a universal language.
Since the beginning of this game, everyone has wanted Abby gone. Abby is so detrimental to morale and just people's smiles in general. She's like a soul sucker around camp. She's like the Dementors from Harry Potter. Nobody can stand having her around. She's just a drain on camp life.
Colton Cumby also probably fits this bill from Survivor Blood vs. Water. He was playing so hard out of the gate, and nobody else on his tribe was interested in dealing with his guns blazing attitude, and after he recognized how big of a pariah he was, he said screw it and quit the game. A rather unique incident here when looking at the whole board, where someone quits early on because they realize they just aren't very good and probably won't win, and you know what, screw it, I have better things to do with my time. Okay, Colton. One of the wackiest social pariahs, maybe the wackiest, was Shambo from Survivor Samoa, who was very much all alone on her tribe from the get-go, yet still made it all the way to the final 6 on the coattails of the Fofofour, taking her in under their wing as an extra number once Galoo became entirely hopeless. Galoo was a very cliquey tribe, and Shambo was very much not aligned with their mentality. To be fair to them, Shambo did dream her targets into existence, so there's always that. It is difficult to see that line of thinking being well received by a group of people, but hey, people come from all walks of life. Not everyone is a mastermind, you're gonna get what you're gonna get.
I think that's God's divine intervention at work. I don't know what makes me think that. I really truly believe that. I think that's what it is. I really do. And I had a dream last night. We voted Dave off.
Actually, what do you get when a social pariah thinks that they are running the game? In the case of someone like Mike Scoopin, Mr. Scoops, we had a man who did blend in with everyone else, but was basically not respected by anyone else. I actually think Lisa from the same season fit this bill pretty well, at least in the pre-merge, when she had to withdraw from the tribe to cry over how alone she really felt. Lisa and Mr. Scoops did turn their game around from the pariahs they began as once the merge hit, but they still never garnered the respect needed to succeed at the game where it mattered most, being respected and or being liked. I will say in the case of Lisa, to cut her some slack, it might have been more in her head than actually being the case of the tribe dynamics, but either way.
She's like the dog that keeps escaping the fence in the backyard. Eventually you just gotta shoot it.
It's hard being on the outside, and you know, maybe I'm just not able to play this game.
Speaking of winning the game as a social pariah, a task that would seem almost impossible, we did have a good example with Mike from Survivor Worlds Apart, who was targeted for both being a threat and for pissing everyone off at the auction, and thus from that point forward was basically shunned the entire rest of the season. While Mike was being plotted against in the background by Rodney, really it was Mike's social faux pas that caused everything to come to a head. He ended up reaching the finals just by being immune every round, and because half the jury were his friends before he became a pariah, it's almost like he was, I don't know, a half pariah. We won't go there. Also, should probably mention John Cochran too was a pariah, not in Caramoan where he won, but in Survivor South Pacific, who then came back a couple seasons later, reformed, and played way better. Because who knew? There's something to be said about being on a tribe with friends over a tribe of totally random strangers. By the way, I'm not discrediting Cochran whatsoever. I just think that as far as Survivor goes, it's an incredibly social game, and social pariahs, there's a good comparison there to be made from Cochran in South Pacific to Cochran in Caramoan. Here's a fun question to consider. What if we had a tribe of social pariahs? Can we just pretend that's a thing? Could you imagine? Oh wait. We had Fong from Survivor Gabon. Right. Proving that even with a group of total misfits, there is always common ground to be had. Speaking of not winning, Russell Hantz was quite a pariah in Survivor Redemption Island. Pretty much impossible to manage and take with to the end on your own terms, Russell went in with a unique reputation and was excised from the rest of his tribe, or at least the majority, to even go so far as to throw a challenge to remove his presence.
He sits in the tent with his concubines and does nothing. He's like a black hole. You know, sucking in energy and light, everything.
My feeling is just get rid of Russell sooner than later.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
sooner the better.
He'd be no good. He'd be a thorn in our side to keep around to emerge.
His tribe just didn't want to handle him, didn't trust him. Seemingly nobody thought they could use him for their own benefit. And then... whoops. And then speaking of the Hantzes, a lot of great segues here. Brandon Hantz basically devolved into a pariah after his spat with another pariah, Philip, in Survivor Caramoan. Brandon wasn't actually that bad socially, but he couldn't stand Philip at all. He couldn't stand that Philip was in a position of power, and he kind of morphed into pariah out of rage, like a Pokemon evolving. There is something to be said about how he felt like he was on the outs and had nobody to turn to, how Brandon felt hopeless enough that he believed he would benefit more by going hard on Philip in a kamikaze attempt than he would anything else. Survivor gets intense, really intense.
Can you drop the stuff on wrestling? Nobody, I'm not conqueror, nobody in there's exterminator and exterior. Like it's really bull.
Well, actually, it's a lot of fun for us.
It's not. Nobody likes it. Nobody likes their name.
Well, great. Well, thanks for sharing it.
Everybody actually doesn't like you.
As far as modern Survivor goes from the past few years, one of the biggest pariahs we have ever come across was a young little blonde country girl by the name of Alicia Holden from Survivor Co. Wrong. One of the biggest inspirations for this video, she kind of stood out like a sore thumb from that group. Between Jason and Scott to the bodybuilder Sydney, Alicia didn't seem to get along with anyone. These personalities just didn't gel with her at all. She managed to make it through several votes, largely because that tribe was a train wreck, but I won't forget about the internet buzz surrounding how she was treated at the time for being on an island of one. If there was ever a more evident case of a social pariah, especially in modern Survivor, I would look at her.
One thing I love about Alicia is she's not a quitter. She's tough, and that boosted her self-esteem so much. She just so badly wanted to contribute in such a huge way, and we need people like that.
On the flip side, we had Jeff Varner, who created a ton of buzz online for making himself such a pariah at that one fateful tribal council from Survivor Game Changers. Varner seemed to be doing pretty fine up to that point as far as his social status went, but the moment those floodgates opened, he was instantly socially excised. I mean, he was getting voted out anyway, but then he became a major pariah, both in that moment live at that tribal council in Fiji and in the eyes of the audience post-show. In David vs. Goliath, we had Jacket and Eggs. Natalie definitely didn't seem to win any friends over with that debacle. Same thing with Wendy, actually, in Edge of Extinction and the Chickens. As much as I enjoyed this cartoonish pre-merge drama, it does stand to reason that it wasn't the best gameplay given the environment. In the case of Wendy, she may have been too nice for her own good. Better gameplay would dictate directing those sentiments more toward her tribe mates and less toward the food supply that doesn't have a say in the matter. While Natalie was probably not nice enough. Even if you think you're right in an argument over food, sometimes the best move is to just not argue at all.
She has like a master's in ungraciousness.
Whenever the tribe is trying to make an important decision, Natalie's voice is the loudest and the most intractable, and it just starts to wear on your nerves. After 15 days of it, I start to lose my patience, and I'm ready to have a little bit of Survivor without Natalie.
Just in this video, we have covered several dozen social pariahs throughout all of Survivor. There's no real conclusion to this video other than to just say that Survivor is obviously very complicated as socialization tends to be. Each of these pariahs are unique in their own way, have their own stories that mostly didn't lead to a W in the end, and perhaps when held under a microscope or herded together like a herd of goats, we can better appreciate what they've brought to this crazy game involving nothing less than a group of strangers forced to band together, carve out a new existence, and learn to adapt. Or fail to adapt, lest they be voted off. With all that being said, my name is Peridiam. These are the social pariahs of Survivor. Let me know what you guys thought about this vid. Is there a greatest social pariah of the bunch? Would you Be a social pariah yourself if you ever went on Survivor. But you know what, either way, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to sharpen your machete on the way out, and I will see you in the next one once I take away your machete, because I don't trust you to hold that.
He sits and sharpens his machete for an hour at a time. Why does he need the machete so sharp? I think he's gonna kill us.
All right, once again, he is sharpening his machete.
That is creepy. It's creepy. It's creepy.